I still remember the sound of his voice. Calm, smug, heartless. "You're fired." That's all he said, while pulling his shirt back on in my own bedroom. That was the night I caught my boss, Richard Cole, in bed with my wife. For a few seconds, my brain couldn't even process what I was seeing. My wife, the woman I'd loved since college, and the man who'd built my career, the one I'd spent years proving myself to. Together, laughing, not even ashamed. By the next morning, I was erased from both their lives. The company email deactivated, locks changed, bank account frozen, because my salary was directly deposited into a joint account that she emptied overnight. The woman I loved took everything, including our dog, Max. Even the small apartment we shared was under her name. I remember standing outside that apartment with nothing but a duffel bag, hearing her voice through the door, telling me to move on. But where do you move when your whole world disappears overnight? For weeks, I lived in my car. I parked behind a diner on Route 19 where the waitress sometimes left coffee on the hood for me. At night, I'd stare at the roof of the car, replaying every moment. The late nights at work, the favors I did for Richard, the loyalty I thought mattered. It all meant nothing. The smell of gasoline and damp seats became my reality. Sometimes, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror and didn't even recognize the man staring back. Then one night, around 2 a.m, when the world was quiet and the rain was falling hard, my phone lit up. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something inside me, maybe desperation, made me open it. The message said, "We've been monitoring your situation. Your father wasn't a janitor like you believed. He built a $73 million company under a false name. To claim it, you must fulfill his last wish." I thought it was a scam, but attached to the message was a photo. My father, standing proudly in front of a steel building labeled Gravitas Industries, and next to him, smiling like he owned the world, was Richard Cole. My boss. My mind froze. My father died when I was 12. He worked nights as a janitor, or at least that's what my mother told me. But in that picture, he didn't look like a janitor. He looked powerful, important. And suddenly, my entire childhood felt like a lie. The next morning, I used the GPS coordinates hidden in the photo's data. It led me 2 hours outside Chicago to an abandoned factory, half covered in vines, the Gravitas logo still faintly visible on the front gates. Inside, the air was thick with dust. Broken machines sat like silent ghosts of a forgotten empire. In the center of the room, a single wooden table with a folder resting on it. My name written across the top. Patient, cold, focused. Karen Blake was first, the company accountant who forged my father's signature and moved millions offshore. Using the passwords buried in my father's old documents, I hacked into her personal files. The things I found: tax evasion, hidden properties, illegal fund transfers, were enough to bury her for life. I compiled everything, sent it anonymously to the IRS, and waited. 2 weeks later, the morning news flashed her name. Corporate accountant arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud case. She looked terrified as cameras surrounded her. I watched it on my phone with a cup of black coffee and felt nothing but quiet satisfaction. 1 down, 4 to go. Victor Hale came next, head of operations, the man who manipulated supply chains and wiped my father's ownership records. He lived like royalty. Golf clubs, private jets, and a beach mansion in Florida. I exposed his fake companies, leaked documents to journalists, and within days, investors pulled out. His empire crumbled faster than it was built. Weeks later, his house was sold under foreclosure. They said he disappeared soon after. I didn't care where he went. All I knew was that justice was catching up. Lucas Green was different. my father's lawyer and old friend, the only one who ever sent my mother small amounts of money after my dad's death. When I tracked him down, I expected another snake. But when I found him, sitting alone in a nursing home, he wasn't the enemy. He told me my father had predicted all of this. He handed me a key to a locker in downtown Chicago, saying only, "He left you something to finish." The locker contained a hard drive labeled Project Phoenix. Inside was the truth, blueprints, patents, and a timeline proving that Gravitas Industries, the company now led by Richard Cole, was originally founded by my father. Every innovation Richard took credit for was stolen. My father had built the technology. Richard had buried him and claimed it as his own. For months, I watched Richard's every move. He'd become even richer, hosting charity events, attending galas, pretending to be the face of integrity. The world saw a businessman. I saw a thief wearing a halo. But the more I observed him, the more I realized revenge couldn't just be personal. It had to be public. So, I planned. I leaked parts of Project Phoenix to the SEC under an alias, forcing an internal audit. I exposed false ownership documents through an anonymous journalist. Each leak tightened the noose a little more. When Gravitas Industries announced its annual board meeting, I knew it was time. I walked into that building wearing a black suit, my father's old watch on my wrist, and a silver briefcase in hand. Years had passed since anyone at that company had seen me. I was a ghost walking through the halls of the empire my father built. The boardroom was filled with men in suits, screens glowing, presentations running, and at the center sat Richard Cole, confident as ever. When I stepped forward, the room fell silent. His face drained of color as he recognized me. I placed the briefcase on the table, opened it, and revealed the original ownership certificates. My father's name embossed in steel. Every board member stared. Before Richard could react, their phones buzzed. I had already sent them the full digital evidence, files, signatures, wire transfers, every crime buried in the shadows. The silence was deafening. Federal agents entered seconds later. Richard's arrogance cracked into fear. He looked around, lost, desperate, realizing his empire was collapsing in front of him. As they cuffed his hands, he turned toward me, eyes wide, and whispered, "Who are you?" I looked at him, the man who stole my father's legacy, my wife, my life, and said, "I'm the janitor's son." 3 months later, headlines everywhere read, "Ethan Cole named rightful owner of Gravitas Industries. Former CEO arrested in $73 million fraud scheme." I stood in my father's old office, the same view he once had, looking down at the city that had watched him fall. For the first time in years, I felt peace. But revenge doesn't heal. It reveals. It shows you who you really are when the pain fades. I wasn't just avenging my father anymore. I was continuing his fight. I restored his name, rebuilt the company with honesty, and hired the same people Richard once destroyed. Every wall of that office carries my father's initials now, carved into steel, just like his legacy. They took my job, my wife, my home, and tried to erase my name. But in the end, they gave me something far greater, a reason to rise. Because sometimes losing everything is the only way to find who you were meant to become. And that was my final revenge.